Heat had a way of clarifying loyalties. The steam-slick walls of the sauna turned every breath into a test of will and every heartbeat into a drum for war, and inside that tight, breathless chamber a boundary snapped between Michael and Chase. It wasn't the kind of argument two men walk off with a towel and a shrug. It was a collision of creeds. Michael arrived with the stoic edge of a father who had already decided where safety ends and mercy begins. Chase carried the quiet, stubborn certainty of a man who has spent a lifetime believing that the truth survives pressure. Willow sat uninvited between them, not in body but as a question no one could leave unanswered. What is she? Victim, culprit, or a mirror reflecting everyone else's weakness? The heat made it easier to say hard things, and harder to ignore the sweat of fear. When the door finally opened and the fog gold light cut across the tile, neither man looked the same. Something irreversible had been said without fanfare. From that instant, their families became the trial. Brook felt the ripples before anyone could articulate the wave. She knew the way a performance tightens in the throat before a note cracks. She heard that same thinning in Chase's voice whenever Willow's name surfaced. People mistake loyalty for silence, but Brook's loyalty operates in surround sound. She listens to the pitch of a confession, the tempo of an apology, the pauses where the truth hides. She loves Michael like family because he is family, and she understands the complicated map of his grief and fury, the ways responsibility has welded itself to his spine. She also loves Chase because he is the hard-earned answer to 100 lonely nights. That dual fidelity was supposed to be the victory she finally got to keep. Instead, it became the battlefield. She stood between a cousin who would burn the world to protect his children and a husband who would walk into fire to absolve a woman he still believes is worth saving. The tragedy wasn't that she had to choose. The tragedy was that each choice pulled a child's future behind it like a comet tail. What makes the Willow problem dangerous is that it is not just about a bullet or a single night full of bad decisions. It is about the archetype she triggers in the men who orbit her. Some people are gravitational wells, she is a story. Men stand taller near her because they think the script demands it. She is not necessarily manipulative, fate manipulates through her. Michael remembers the vows he made and the betrayals he endured. He remembers a house where quiet became a weapon, where trust became a chess piece. Chase remembers a fragile promise that shattered and left him with scar tissue the shape of forgiveness. Each man claims he wants justice, but what they really want is an ending that corrects the past. That is why Michael evaluates risks with the cold calculus of a parent, and why Chase reopens cases time has already tried. Each man thinks he's insulating the vulnerable. They are, in fact, exposing themselves. The Quartermain estate had become a geography of alarms, the kind that chime not only when a window lifts but when a memory does. After the sauna confrontation, Michael began drawing firmer lines around his children, lines that were, to him, safety corridors and, to everyone else, warning tape. He catalogued every incident that proved the perimeter needed to hold: the rush of footsteps on marble when Willow forced her way in, the quaver in Daisy's voice when fear blotted out decorum, the revelation that boundaries, once crossed, invite repetition. Michael didn't tell the story like a provocation. He told it like evidence. He set the facts down one by one, the way he had learned to as a son and a father. Here is what happened, here is what it means for my kids, here is why the door is closed. The man who listened was supposed to be his brother-in-arms by marriage. Instead, Chase filed the recital under contentious testimony, a thing to verify rather than a pain to respect. When he left the gatehouse, he didn't go home to debrief with his wife. He went to the prison. Prisons have a way of rewriting people. The air in the visitor's room carries disinfectant and regret. Willow emerged into that light with a posture that practiced endurance and a gaze that still located a horizon beyond the fence. Chase told himself he was there as a detective interested in process, not as an ex-lover interested in absolution. It is the sort of lie good men tell themselves so they can still look at their wedding rings without flinching. She didn't need to cry to persuade him. She only needed to stand very still inside the frame of a story where she'd been miscast. The details of the shooting remained stubborn and messy, as details do, but he became obsessed with the seams. Inconsistencies, timelines, assumptions turned to dogma. It wasn't love exactly that sharpened his focus, it was the old reflex to save someone who looks like they're drowning, even if they insist they can swim. When he left, he didn't promise anything out loud, but something in his stride made a vow he could not unmake. A good cop knows when he's compromised. A good man thinks he can outrun what that means. Brooke Lynn sensed the drift the way a musician hears a metronome slide off beat. She did not howl or accuse. She reorganized her calendar around contingencies. A meeting she didn't cancel because she might need proof she's still herself. A family dinner she refused to miss because people are keeping score now. She folded Michael's kids into her plans with a careful warmth that says, "You are not pawns," and "You are the reason." When the subject of Willow came up, she didn't rehearse the crimes but the pattern, because patterns decide the future more reliably than headlines do. She knew how easily rescue transforms into romance in Port Charles, how a jailbreak of emotions becomes a storyline with collateral damage. The vow she had spoken at her wedding was not merely about fidelity, it was about alignment. Marriage demands that two independent compasses agree on north. She feared Chase's needle had started to twitch toward a field not their own. Her fear wasn't possessive. It was strategic. Loyalty to the past makes orphans of the present. Gio's presence in Brooke Lynn's life complicated her plans in ways that did not fit into a neat montage. Love does not fix old absences, it forces them to speak. Adoption had once been a bright thread she thought she could pull straight through the fabric of their marriage. Now it's snagged. Gio was not a symbol, he was a son whose memories are shaped like closed doors and unanswered questions. He heard promises with the ear of someone who knows how easily they can be broken. Brooke Lynn wanted to honor him without anchoring herself to a grief that would swallow every future. So she paused the adoption conversations. Not because she loved Chase less, but because she refused to trade one child's stability for another child's wish. In the hierarchy of decisions, the present child outranked the hypothetical one. This is a cruel arithmetic to explain to a man who has already begun sketching a nursery in his head. She tried explaining it in music, in food, in the clatter of an ordinary morning. Some days he understood. Other days he stared at the empty place setting his heart had reserved and mistook her prudence for retreat. The case itself, Drew's shooting, its shattered chronology, its adversarial witness lists, had become a mirror held up to the entire town. Everyone saw what they brought into focus. Michael saw a wife turned unpredictable, a home invaded by chaos, a line he needed to repaint in bright, unmistakable color. Chase saw a puzzle with pieces jammed together wrong, and a woman defined by the ugliest version of her worst night. The speculation that Michael might have staged a narrative to protect his family offended him, but not enough to keep him from testing the premise. The suggestion that Chase could be white knighting his way into another heartbreak insulted him, but not enough to stop the investigation. In truth, they were both right about the other and wrong about themselves. That is how tragedies stay inevitable. Daisy Gilmore's fear became a lodestar. A housekeeper's account, if handled carelessly, can sound like gossip. If handled well, it becomes the skeleton key. Michael treated her story as sacred. He replayed the tremor in her hands, the way she looked at the doorway as if the past might re-enter without a knock. He built his argument on the ethics of care. If you cannot keep your staff safe, you have already failed your children. Chase did not discount Daisy, but he refused to let one frightened recollection harden into unquestionable stone. He took statements from the security system like they were temperamental witnesses. He treated timing like a suspect. The closer he pressed, the more he drifted from the easy warmth of his kitchen table. The irony would not be lost on him later. In the name of protecting one woman's reputation, he endangered his wife's trust. Meanwhile, Brooke Lynn took stock of her resources the way a general inventories rations before winter. She had experience navigating family storms. She had the forester of her own life, music, schedules, names on spreadsheets, that she could micromanage into compliance. She had a cousin who needed her soft strength and a husband who needed her hard boundaries. Above all, she had Gio, whose questions about history felt like pop quizzes she hadn't studied for. When he spoke of abandonment, the air shifted. It wasn't that he accused her of anything she had done, it was that he told her how absence feels when it calcifies into identity. She resolved to make no promises that could not survive scrutiny. If that meant telling Chase not yet on a baby, she would own the discomfort. If that meant telling Michael that she would not be weaponized against her husband, she would own the nuance. She would not betray the living to honor the past, nor betray the past to stage a perfect future. Michael tightened procedures. He shifted schedules. He taught his children how to distinguish between safety and cowardice, how to love people without letting them into rooms they cannot be trusted to leave. He had no appetite for lectures about compassion from men who would not bear the responsibility of his rooftops and his alarm codes. In private, once the house fell quiet, he sometimes wondered whether he had misread the exact moment where protectiveness turns into paranoia. But then he would remember Daisy's hands and Willow's eyes and the way a single risk can cascade into catastrophe. He does not want to be a warden. He wants to be a father who sleeps. The town rarely lets either dream come true. Chase moved in concentric circles. He revisited interviews, checked badge cam footage, reconstructed distances in parking lots where stories changed by half steps. None of it proved what he wanted it to prove, and none of it disproved what Michael insisted was true. The work had that dangerous, exhilarating feel of a chase scene where the music grows, and you forget that you are running on the roof of your marriage. Officers learn to compartmentalize. Husbands learn to combine. Chase was trying to do both, and the seam tore. He told himself that Brook Lynn would understand because she had married a cop with her eyes open. But understanding is not the same as consent, and consent is not the same as approval. She loves that he is thorough. She does not love being the collateral cost of his thoroughness. As for Willow, prisons forge a new theology. She practiced repentance like a craft and hope like a discipline. On certain days she accepted the possibility that people had rewritten her into the villain and that nothing she could say would wrestle the pen out of their hands. On other days she remembered who she had been before fear taught her shortcuts, and the fury rose like a living thing. If Chase's attention warmed her cell, she tried not to analyze the temperature. Gratitude can be a seduction if you stare at it too long. She plotted her survival in small tasks: read, breathe, count, imagine one morning without a guard's shadow. If she thought of Brook Lynn, it was with a complicated tenderness that included the admission that some love stories deserve long peace. She had not come here to ruin another woman's home. She had come here because the past is heavy and people drop it at the worst times. The future narrowed to a hinge. Chase would either bring Brook Lynn into his process or let secrecy make his choices for him. Michael would either leave room for the possibility that new facts could modify old convictions, or he would let fear petrify into policy. Brook Lynn would either interpret delay as disrespect or recognize that loving two existences, wife and mother, requires time not even money can buy. Gio would either forgive, slowly and messily, or carry the bruise forward and press it into whatever came next. And Willow would either be cleared by evidence or condemned by exhaustion, the town's attention span moving on before the truth could catch up. Then, as autumn set its jaw and the wind sharpened, a single discovery reframed the case. It was not the kind of twist that wins the day with confetti. It was a quiet line item tucked into a log. A badge swipe out of place, a security camera refocused at the precise wrong minute, a device pairing that should not have existed at all. Chase found it because details eventually confess to those who refuse to stop asking questions. He did not celebrate. He measured. He ran it past the timeline like a taut string. He began to see how someone could have entered a narrative already alive and steered it off course just enough to make a good woman look like the architect of her own ruin. He also saw how easily a desperate husband could mistake that steering for proof of malice rather than a symptom of panic in a house already made of glass. The evidence didn't exonerate in full, it complicated at scale. Which is to say, it told the truth in Port Charles's native language. Chase carried the finding the way a surgeon carries a scalpel, careful, aware that cutting wrong would cost blood he could not get back. He did not want to march into Brook Lynn's studio with triumph because his success would sound like betrayal to a cousin she had promised to protect. He did not want to appear at Michael's door with a lecture because fathers do not respond to, "I told you so," when their children are at stake. He did not want to meet Willow with deliverance because deliverance, offered prematurely, is another kind of prison. He wanted process, accountability, and a way for 3 families to exit this labyrinth without leaving a sacrifice behind. That is not how these towns work. These towns demand spectacle. Brook Lynn watched him think and recognized the posture he takes when a decision will cascade. She brewed coffee as if ritual could fortify the soul, then said the most honest thing, that she would stand beside him if his next act honored truth and did not torch their home. Not because she preferred him over Michael or owed him over Willow, but because the vows she made did not ask her to be neutral, they asked her to be brave. She would back him in a pursuit that made the world safer for Gio and for Michael's children at once. She would not bless a crusade that crowned one and crucified the other. If he could thread that needle, she would be the hand that steadied the cloth. If he could not, she would be the hand that removed the cloth altogether, before it caught fire. In the end, Michael's strength was never his volume. It was his capacity to absorb. When Chase brought the data to him, not as a condemnation, but as a question, Michael did not slam the door. He did what good fathers do. He took the information, mapped it against his memories, and looked for the line where love of children, respect for a wife, and fidelity to truth converge. It did not absolve his fear, it burnished it. But he could see, faintly, a path that protected his house without unjustly barricading a woman who might not be the author of his worst night. He would not become Willow's champion. He would become her accurate historian. In a town like this, that is a revolution. So the hinge held, at least for the moment. Chase turned the finding into motions that asked the court to widen its aperture. Brook Lynn used her leverage to keep conversations from hardening into verdicts at family dinners that feel like diplomatic summits. Michael reshaped his rules to shield his children without turning them into guards. Gio watched, learning the distinction between promises and plans. Willow waited, practicing the art of hope that doesn't depend on rescue. And the city exhaled, just enough to stop the trembling in its hands. "Trouble in paradise," the whispers said. Perhaps. But paradise isn't a location in Port Charles. It's a fragile agreement between imperfect people to keep setting the table even when storms blow out the power. The heat that started in a sauna had traveled a long way, and it had burned away illusions that needed to go. What remained were lines drawn with steadier hands. A marriage that might bend without breaking, a brotherhood that might disagree without detonating, a case that might resolve without scapegoats, and a woman who might walk out of a gate into a morning that has room for re-entry. The next move will not be simple, it will be consequential. And for once, consequence might feel like grace.